This is the Sandman podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're discussing The Dead Boy Detectives, Episode 2, The Case of the Dandelion Shrine, and Episode 3, The Case of the Devlin House.
What the bloody hell is this?
Up that? What's your punishment? It's a caging spell. It keeps you in this town. My kingdom. You can't leave, not in a car, not in a boat, not in a plane, not on a train, and definitely not through a mirror. You little ghosts are so tricky.
Unacceptable. Kindly remove it. We cannot stay here. It is dangerous.
Oh, Edwin, what was it you just said to me? I don't see the harm in one little spell.
Welcome back, fellow dreamers, to the Sandman podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're back with The Dead Boy Detectives, but this time we're discussing Episode 2, The Case of the Dandelion Shrine, and Episode 3, The Case of the Devlin House. I am one of your hosts, John.
I am your other host, Derek. Your fellow Dead Boy Detectives, I guess.
Yes, we are dead inside. Look at those eyes. If only we weren't an audio podcast and instead we're on YouTube in video, you'd see the dead boy detectives.
Yeah, thankfully we do not have video for the podcast yet. Definitely good. It's been a long old week as we close out most of our other shows and focus on the Dead Boy Detectives now. Finished up with Shogun, finished up with Invincible, one last episode of The Bad Batch coming out this week, and then it'll be all Dead Boy Detectives the next couple of weeks.
It will. Yeah. Really enjoying this series so
fun,
far. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the characters. Yeah. I'm just liking the pace of this show, to be honest.
Especially the way we're recording it with 2 episodes per podcast. That's working really well for me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. So yes, without further ado, before we get into our spoiler-filled discussion of these 2 episodes, please remember, fellow dreamers, if you are new to TV Podcast Industries, or you are a member of the Neil Gaiman verse, whether that is Good Omens or The Sandman, which we have also covered, please remember you can head on over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can subscribe to any dreamy or nightmarish podcast player of your choice.
Yeah, try to choose a dreamy one. Nightmarish podcast player is not fun.
Exactly. Also, please send in any feedback that you have by email to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or over on our spoiler-filled post on our Facebook group. Just head on over to facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries.
Absolutely. And I want to apologize here on the podcast for something that I apologized for on Facebook. All of the episode titles that we had were matched to the wrong names when we got our previews for the Netflix show. So unfortunately, when I put out the spoiler posts, they were all messed up. So I'm really sorry for anybody who was trying to keep track of it. The episode numbers were right, but I messed up all the names, unfortunately.
I think we need a song by David Tennant, actually, from one of another property of Neil Gaiman's, because I think I did kind of say they didn't look right.
You were right. You were right. I was wrong. You were right.
I do love those tones of David Tennant from Good Omens Season 2 when I happen to get something correct.
I feel like I have to put it back on the soundboard, John, so that because I have to use it pretty often. Hopefully nothing wrong this time. So again, apologies for that, but they are all fixed over at our Facebook group. If you want to share any of your thoughts, there are spoiler posts for each of the episodes. And as we said, we're going to be covering 2 episodes a week up until the finale of Dead Boy Detectives.
Yes, but let us get into our spoiler-filled discussion of these 2 episodes of Dead Boy Detectives. Derek, for episode 2, The Case of the Dandelion Shrine. Who gave us what, where, when, and how?
This is based on characters created by Neil Gaiman and Matt Wagner. This show was created for television by Steve Yockey, who is the co-showrunner along with Beth Schwartz for the show. Episode 2 was written by Shoshana Sachi and Cheech Manahar. Shoshana was a staff writer on Doom Patrol and an executive story editor on the episode that had the Dead Boy Detectives in it, which I mentioned last week. And Cheech is a staff writer on this show and will also be in episode 5.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
So actually in an episode.
Yeah, we'll have to look out for Cheech in that episode.
Good stuff.
When we get up to it. But he's the co-writer for this episode. And the episode was directed by Glenn Winter. Glenn was a director and director of photography on loads of the Arrowverse shows, where Greg Berlanti, one of the executive producers for this show, came from.
Good stuff. Yeah. Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Love when all these people are working together, especially the way this property has worked. As I mentioned a little bit in the last episode, this was originally supposed to be a spin-off of Doom Patrol, but when the DC universe was taken over by James Gunn, there was no place for any of the DC shows that were currently on air to fit. He wants to do a whole universe all connected together. So that cancelled Lois and Clark, it cancelled Doom Patrol, and has cancelled the spin-off of Dead Boy Detectives. So
DC's been all over the place.
Yeah, time for somebody to take the reins and bring it all back in together. But it did also allow this show to get much more connected to the Sandman universe on Netflix.
Which is probably a better thing for it, actually.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for episode 2, The Case of the Dandelion Shrine?
Sure. After he used magic on a local tabby to solve his most recent case, Edwin has run into the unhappy Cat King. As punishment, he is unable to leave Port Townsend unless he makes the Cat King happy or counts all the cats in his kingdom. Returning to the Tongue and Tail butcher shop, Crystal discovers a supernatural case in their own home as she learns her housemate Nico has been infested with some dandelion sprites. Working together, the Dead Boy detectives extract the angry tiny beings, but Nico's near-death experience has enabled her to see the ghostly investigators. Meanwhile, the witch Esther creates a real boy out of her crow familiar to get her revenge on the investigators. And in the afterlife, Night Nurse gets the trail of the escaped Dead Boys and sets up her investigation to return them to their rightful place. Dandelion Sprites. It's like a smash of two drinks, Dandelion and Burdock and Sprite.
It is, isn't it?
I wonder how they would mix together, given Sprite, I guess, relatively recent, and then ye olde dandelion Burdock.
Yeah, not too sure how well they'd mash together, but they have had flavoured Sprite in the past, haven't they? They've had like lemon Sprite and stuff like that. So maybe
Sprite is lemon, isn't it?
It's
like lemonade.
Yeah, it is. But what was there was definitely something mixed in with Sprite.
I know Coke has had vanilla and cherry.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, but yeah, who knows?
I'm sure there has been. But
yes, come back, Lilt. All is forgiven with your sugar content.
Absolutely.
But let us get into our top case notes for this episode 2. The Case of the Dandelion Shrine.
Yeah, it was really easy on the Dead Boy Detectives to choose our case notes because they come up on screen.
Yes,
they come up in titles on the screen, and the first one that comes up is The Cat King. The one overall thing I would say about this episode, the overarching bit that I really took away from it after episode 1 is this whole episode is about revenge for all the things the Dead Boy Detectives did in the first episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything kicks off off the back of it, doesn't it? Pretty much.
Definitely, yes. I love this with Edwin. The most awkward of the Dead Boy detectives being taken to the most extravagant and sensual Cat King ever to grace the screen. I mean, I've never seen a Cat King before, but I really liked it.
This is what you thought he was going to be like.
I mean, you know, the offer from the Cat King to make him happy or count all the cats in Port Townsend. I think I'd go with the former, to be honest. I would be down with a bit of, you know, slap and scratching with the old, the Cat King.
You know, it's not said out loud, but is Edwin just worried about the scratches he may get from it? He does say that the cat scratches can cause terrible pain to a ghost.
They are. I mean, we do see another human that's been eaten by the cat. So, I mean, these cats are not, and the Cat King in particular, are not messing around, given that, Edwin's use of magic on his, tabby minion, was basically a total car crash for him. And, you know, here there is the discussion of the penalty or the punishment, of which one probably, I guess they might be both punishments, but one sounds less of a punishment than the other.
It does. I think it's kind of insurmountable. We saw the amount of cats that were in Port Townsend just at the location to make sure that everyone went in to see the Cat King. There were hundreds just there on screen. So I presume there's loads of other cats all around the city. You know, house cats, I presume, are still included, and all the stray cats that are out there. So that's pretty interesting. I also think it's a really nice touch, given that the last episode with the Sandman was the Dream of a Thousand Cats, which was an animated story with loads of cats all coming together. And here we have effectively live action cats all appearing in one location.
Cats as well.
A lot of them.
I do like these cats. I like that they're potty mouthed.
Yep.
I like that we have this sensual, sexually liberated Cat King, which ultimately, you know, one of the main drivers here that the Cat King is sort of introducing is for Edwin to actually think about his own sexuality and to think about his relationships. You know, he asks, who is Charles to you?
Is it a special relationship?
Yeah, is it a special relationship? He says this is a safe space. And the Cat King said, you know, is fascinated by Edwin. I love that he calls him oddly handsome.
Yes, absolutely. And I also like that not only is he a sensual Cat King, he's also a consensual Cat King.
Yes.
He's not going to force him to do anything
at
all. Just make him happy or count all the cats. But I love the way he says it. I think he's really good. Lucas Gage in this role is excellent. He is absolutely sexy and sensual, perfect for this cat that knows everything that's going on in the town. He's surrounded by his minions, effectively all the cats in the city, but he is there to protect them. If somebody does anything bad against them, he's going to be the one that will defend them all. So the idea that Edwin would use magic on one of his cats has completely angered him. Although he doesn't seem that angry. He seems like he's going to punish him because he has to. But
I mean, ultimately, his punishment is that he puts this caging spell on Edwin that effectively traps him in Townsend. And it will come off as soon as Edwin makes the Cat King happy.
Exactly.
So he needs to arrange something, whether that's sex, but that seems to offend Edwin's old-fashioned sensibilities, as the Cat King says, or instead he just goes, well, you can count all the cats in Port Townsend.
Exactly.
So it's in Edwin's court, and it looks like he is going to count the cats.
I think he is.
Which makes sense. But I like the fact that this has challenged Edwin around who he is, what his relationships are, from friendships through to, you know, more sensual, consensual, sexual relationships as well. And I think just the way the Cat King is sort of goes so close up to Edwin's face, you know that's going to make him so awkward, and he's just going to be completely freaked out by this. But this is another side of Edwin that, in a sense, the Cat King is scratching at.
Well, exactly. I'm glad they didn't take the third option that was proposed by Crystal in here when they first arrived in the warehouse to meet the Cat King. Crystal suggests that they just kick as many cats out of the way as possible to get out. But of course, Edmund reveals another bit of the mythology of the Dead Boy detectives here. That a cat scratch is very, very dangerous to a ghost. It can damage them really badly. But I'm glad we didn't see that on screen. That we had loads of cats being kicked out of the way by Crystal.
Yeah, absolutely. But effectively now, I guess, moving on to case note number 2, you know, in a sense, the Dead Boy detectives and Crystal are trapped here. You know, we see Edwin trying to get the bracelets off, but we have some light reading here.
Yes. Case note number 2 is some light reading, as it's written up on screen. And this is caused because they have to do a new investigation because of the other tenant that lives above the butcher shop in Port Townsend, Nico, is acting very unusually.
We get that kind of heart-stopper moment again with Nico, with the big, you know, bubblegum pink and the youthful kind of animated characters and flowers and animals and so on. But and we got that in episode 1 as well. But this time, Nico faints with blood coming from the nose. And this is all the while with Crystal, because we have Edwin trying to get his bracelet off, really.
I love that moment where he's just smacking the bracelet off one of the columns in the room, and you just see Jenny coming up going, "Could you please keep the noise down?" Because she, of course, thinks it's Crystal because she can't see the dead boy detectives. Just like, I don't care what you're going through, just stop with the noise.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely. Yeah. But, whilst we have Crystal connecting with Nico, I do like the fact that, Charles isn't trapped here, so is able to go and pass through the mirror into their office in London, whilst Edwin can only go as far as his wrist will allow, in order to get a load of books, so that they can try and find out what is wrong with Nico, because all Crystal is seeing are these intense colours. And we see here that, not medical, a number of different things. And in the end, Edwin points to a book on mystical parasites, magical parasites, where we have these dandelion sprites, that have somehow gotten and attached themselves into Nico. And I do like, this, that, that they crave adoration. So this spectacle that Crystal is seeing is their way to try and get all eyes on Nico, but actually onto them, so they get all that adoration. And once they're powerful enough, they exit the body, not in a polite way, I think Edwin says. I mean, ultimately explodes like a dandelion head after it's flowered. All these little sprites get sort of fluttered on the wind in order to infect their next host.
Other people, exactly. I think this is a really interesting concept. We're very used to Neil Gaiman's type of writing. I know he didn't write the Dead Boy Detectives and isn't hugely involved in the show, but the concepts he takes from various mythologies, things like the inspiration being taken from dandelions, which are used as flowers to signify bravery or to encourage bravery in people, which is exactly what Nico describes that when she's talking about her history with Crystal, when Crystal sits down listening to her story about what happened to Nico, that she lost her father and that her mother shipped her off to boarding school to keep her away from the fear and keep her away from the sadness that was in the house after her father died, and Crystal on the other side of the door telling her that story about her family, and obviously she doesn't know who they are, and that's where she is, but the two of them bonding over their shared sad history really is quite interesting. But again, the mythology side of it, of what's causing this mystical problem within Nico being taken from mythology, I think is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also a nice thing that Nico and Crystal are sort of bonding or connecting over this sort of, shared loss or death in the case of their parents. Because, it's that Nico won't let her into the shower when she's trying to wash the blood off after her initial faint. But she's not actually in the shower. She's just trying to stay away from Crystal.
Exactly.
And Crystal just talks to the door effectively, and eventually it opens up. So I like that happens as well, because it comes to the point where then Crystal tells Nico about her special friends in Edwin and Charles.
Yes, she does.
To which she replies, "Are you insane?"
Are you insane? Exactly. But very politely,
yeah,
again.
Absolutely.
She's very nice, you can still get on with her. But she does hear a little bit about the boys at that stage. But also just a little note here as well, that the mailman that was interrupting them back in London with all of their messages that were coming in, he's still following them and has arrived in Port Townsend with a bunch of notices. And one of those notices leads them to the magic shop in town, where they're going to go to get something that might be able to help them out to get rid of the dandelion sprites. So we get to meet a new character in this scene here. We get to meet Mick, or Tragic Mick, the former walrus, now a human, in the magic shop, who was practically no help to the boys. Well, at least not particularly. He effectively, all he does is give them an enchanted jar, which allows the sound of the ocean to be projected out when you open it up, which you probably could get from a shell on the beach. But that's all he gives them, and tries to tell them a story of how he became a man when he was formerly a walrus. And they're kind of going, no, we don't have time for that. We have to deal with this case that we're on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We also do see Esther browsing nonchalantly in Tragic Mix as well.
Quietly and nonchalantly, yes.
And does overhear that they are stuck in the town as a result of the Cat King. But I like the fact that she buys effectively a revenge starter kit.
Yeah.
Here.
Yes. A terrarium, I think it was.
It is, yeah. It looks like but it's kind of like the only thing I really kind of noticed on it was a mushroom.
Yeah.
And the opening credits do have mushrooms in them, so I suspect it's got something to do with that connection.
I presume so. But yes, I kind of like that she does seem to subscribe to the idea of revenge as a dish best served cold. She doesn't come out of the shadows and attack the two of them in the shop. She's going to make a plan and she's going to enact it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what it seems like.
Get that sense from them, for sure. Yeah. I think then with realizing that they've found what has infected Nico is causing her condition, then they try and work out where Nico has been in Port Townsend here, so they kind of start to ask her questions where she recounts that she was collecting dandelions in the woods. That was to help with her father's loss, and she tells the tale that her father said a dandelion would inspire bravery in a person, and so to help her sort of deal with his loss, she goes out
and moving to the other side of the world as well.
Well, that's true.
Yep.
And the boarding school that she's in, she goes collecting dandelions in the woods, and does remember a shrine there as well. So it also leads to the sprites really trying to get attention and adoration on themselves by showing Nico off downstairs in the butcher's shop with Jenny and a good number of customers, all there to sort of give the adoration that the dandelion sprites need and crave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, it's a really interesting one, isn't it?
I did like that. But I think we go for a short interlude here with our case note number 3. Meanwhile, in the afterlife.
Yeah, the night nurse, following up on the end of last episode where she was kind of informed that the Dead Boy detectives had appeared on Earth. She's trying to set up the investigation to find them, really. Yeah, so she's trying to work out who they are exactly. She calls in what look like twins that work for her to give her the lowdown on who each of the boys is. So again, kind of recapping the idea that Edwin disappeared in 1914. He was supposed to go to hell, and here he is, dead and well, I guess, on Earth. And then also that Charles disappeared in 1989. He died in 1989 and should be in the afterlife. So it seems like her job, night nurse's job, is finding the lost kids and bringing them to where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's assigning them correctly to their afterlife moment.
Yes.
Like it sounds, very chaperone in Disney. And I'm going to now show you your Disney experience. This is, but obviously more severe with the night nurse.
Well, certainly with Edwin, because she's being brought back to hell.
Larger consequences, exactly. But it's kind of, she needs to start the paperwork to assign these two missing children, or naughty boys, as she keeps calling them, to their afterlife.
Exactly. And I kind of like the way they're doing this, and a little bit more backstory about the two characters with Edwin and Charles. Again, kind of underlined that we don't know much about Charles here. We know a lot about Edwin because he was off in hell for 85 years, I guess, and then left hell somehow and meets up with Charles. So, but we don't know much about Charles. He just didn't turn up where you're supposed to turn up, basically. So
exactly,
we'll see that.
Continues.
Sure. Yeah, we'll see it later on in the series. I'm sure it's different from the comic book, so I'm intrigued to see how it'll play out in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us get on to our case note number 4, a clearing in the woods.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. This is just the two boys going off looking for this place where the dandelion sprites appeared for the first time to Nico. But I just like the moment between the two of them, because the two of them are on their own here, and Edwin doesn't really want to tell Charles the full details behind what the Cat King did, just simply says to him, well, I have to count all the cats in Port Talbot. And you can kind of tell from knowing Charles, he knows there's something missing
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
story, and he knows that's a very unusual request because it sounds absolutely impossible. So there must be something else behind it. But Edwin is still so uncomfortable, he's not going to share that with Charles, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you get that kind of feeling all the way through this episode of, Charles's suspicion that Edwin is holding something back. He does ask, what are you not telling me? Around his encounter, Edwin's encounter with the Cat King. Even I think Crystal kind of spots it. I mean, she has a great line where she says, you're like an old married couple on acid, because they're kind of, stum all the time, but it's just so heightened with the two of them.
Absolutely. And just
like
kind of bickering with each other a bit. Yeah.
Edwin is literally the closed book that the Cat King is trying to pry open. And it's really difficult.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But they do find the home of the Dandelion Sprites. They find the area where the shrine is sitting with its little vessel underneath, and they eventually work out a way to read the runes that are along the side of it, which I kind of like these little concepts that the two of them have magical objects that allow them to see things that the rest of the world couldn't see. And here it's a pair of glasses that wouldn't look out of place on Luna Lovegood in the Harry Potter series.
Absolutely.
These glasses that are allowing them to read the runes that have kind of disappeared. And Edwin is able to translate the runes, and the runes say that there's a vessel underneath the shrine which is keeping the Dandelion Sprites at bay.
Yeah.
And there's only one of them. This vessel underneath is the vessel that can keep the Dandelion Sprites. And of course, they're attacked as they pick it up by the skeletons of the dead bodies around them. And Charles promptly breaks the magical container that they have to to
absolutely
keep them.
And luckily though, they do get a workaround thanks to Tragic Mick, who was absolutely no help whatsoever, but the jar he does give them is an enchanted jar, and the vessel was enchanted, so they are able to use the enchanted jar from Magic Mix. I actually loved then how this played out once they were back at the apartment, and they lure the sprites out by Crystal offering to them that, she will be their host, because not only will you get the attention from the living, but also as a psychic medium, you'll get the attention from the dead as well. So
you'll be feasting,
absolutely feasting, as long as when they exit politely from Nico's body, which is effectively, they will explode out like the seeds of a dandelion head caught in the wind. They'll just blow everywhere and projectile out. That they don't do that effectively, so that Nico stays alive. And I just really kind of like the fact that, once they've ejected out and they're trapped in this jar, so Charles effectively catches them mid-air as they try to sort of get themselves into Crystal. These two sprites are absolutely foul-mouthed.
They are hilarious.
Just like the kitties. I'm kind of liking that sense of humor, actually.
Absolutely.
There's these additional sort of characters here, whether it's the swarm of Port Townsend's cats, or now with these two dandelion sprites, where yes, it's less airs and graces of the night nurse and more just potty-mouthed, foul-mouthed, cursing.
Exactly.
Certainly from the sprites.
I think they're absolutely hilarious. But
Kingham and Litty are the two sprites.
That's it.
And they're just really annoyed that they're stuck in this jar. They'll tell Crystal and everyone else just how bad it is, how bad they are, with numerous curse words as well.
Exactly. Really, really like it. But Nika's, of course, a lovely person, so she's going to keep them in her room in the jar. They're just going to cover it over with a jumper to block them out. But
which, in a sense, brings us to our case note number 5, which is case closed.
Case closed, yes.
Nico does decide to keep them because she thinks actually they're adorable in a foul-mouthed, potty-mouthed way.
And also because she knows what it's like to not get what she wants.
Yes.
So she's going to be there to help them through the withdrawal symptoms, I guess. There was one of the other things that the runes themselves said that they have to be constantly fed. So they're going to be very difficult to deal with, but very small and trapped in an enchanted jar now. So they could be okay to deal with, right?
But given the near-death experience that Nico had with the sprites really ramping up their adoration sort of volume to 11 in order to sort of preempt an explosion out.
Yeah.
You know, because she was kind of wriggling and wreathing around with these sprites trying to get out. You sense something bad was happening.
Yeah, but there's definitely an exorcist moment as the light was spewing out of her mouth, and she looked like she was turning quite purple when they were inside. So she's definitely had some challenges trying to get them out as well.
Absolutely, but it means now that she can actually see Charles and Edwin, so she knows that Crystal isn't insane like she thought at the start, and
she's a new haircut too.
She's gone grey effectively, just like me. I must have had a dandelion sprite or near-death experience at some point.
Well, she's gone white, John. You're not that
white.
You're not that
That's
white.
What it is white.
It's mixed. It's mixed grey and dark. Still, don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You haven't gone fully white yet.
Not fully. Well, I'm catching up on you, Nico. Catching up.
There you go. Anything else about the closing out of the episode, the case being closed? We mentioned earlier on about the mailman arriving for the first time in Port Townsend, bringing the post to the Dead Boy detectives. Now he's arriving again with an armful of posts for the Dead Boy detectives and their new medium, who are attracting lots of attention from the ghosts of Port
there's
Talbot.
a line forming outside of Jenny's butcher shop.
Exactly.
As well.
Exactly. And I want to apologise because I definitely said Port Talbot in there quite a few times when I meant Port Townsend.
Yes.
Port Talbot is a real place in Wales, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So I will definitely get that wrong as the podcast goes on. So I'm sorry if I said that there. I meant Port Townsend.
But the other interesting thing as the case closes as well is we do see Esther bringing Monty the Raven to human form after... To be honest, after putting him through a fair amount of pain,
Absolutely.
I mean, almost like ripping the poor Raven apart. Like, you see feathers going, you hear the cawing going at each move that she does. So it sounds pretty painful, but she effectively creates this new cute boy, effectively, in the form of Monty. So I suspect her plan may involve Edwin.
Well, maybe.
With Monty. And possibly to lure him in to whatever she's got planned for them that involves, I assume, a mushroom.
Well, maybe. Yeah, exactly. But, it's a really interesting one. I just love when she creates Monty and he sits up on the table and she goes, "Oh, who wouldn't trust that face?"
No, exactly.
As if it's just this lovely little moment, but she's just a pretty, she's just done some, quite significant, breakage of all of his bones to turn him into this boy, basically.
Absolutely. So, it sounded horrific.
It really did.
But really good, ending with this little sort of tease for the next episodes. You know, how will Monty sort of get to know Edwin? What is the plan for Esther, I guess?
Yeah, I guess we'll find out as we go on to our next episode of Dead Boy Detectives. But overall, John, what did you think of the second episode of Dead Boy Detectives?
I really enjoyed it. I'd give it 4 murderous Dandelion and Burdocks out of 5. Yeah, I just really enjoy.
Very niche. Burdocks drink is very, very niche for our audience, isn't it?
I remember it as a kid and it was horrendous, but now I kind of quite like it. It's just an unusual taste.
Yeah. It's made for old people.
Well, it is. It's kind of like almost medicinal, but I kind of quite like it now.
There you go. Stick a bit of gin in it. It's always grand,
exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah.
A bit of gin will solve everything, I guess, ultimately. Or vodka, or spiced rum. Actually, spiced rum with Dandelion and Burdock could be quite nice. Oh, right.
All right, let's get back to your rating for the
like
episode.
Esther on Monty. But I really enjoyed this. I'm loving the pitter patter. I like just seeing sort of this group now forming in Crystal, Charles, and Edwin, and potentially now with Nico being one, their neighbor in the apartment above Jenny's shop. I like the story. I think these two sprites are just hilarious. And I'm glad that Nico is keeping them, because I'm hoping that we will see them from time to time over the course of the episodes. Because who doesn't want some more foul-mouthed Dandelion sprites in their episodes?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, 4 murderous Dandelion and Burdocks out of 5.
Great stuff. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one too. We will take a break while we go off and watch episode 3 and come back with that in a moment.
Do you know the Devlin murders?
Please tell me you're not doing a stupid podcast or something.
No. I just heard some people talking about it in the, it was the malt shop, and it sounded crazy.
Well, I was super young when it happened, so all I heard was small town rumor mill gossip.
Welcome back, fellow dreamers. We are talking about the Dead Boy Detectives, and this is episode 3, The Case of the Devlin House.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. This really did feel like an episode of Supernatural.
It was really good.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Although I kept thinking of the Devlins, the band. I think I had an album once of theirs.
Irish band, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, yeah. Probably because some of their music was on 6 Feet Under back in the day, long time ago.
20 years.
I can't even probably remember any of the tracks, to be honest. But
I don't know where the Devlins are now, but I hope
remember.
the band didn't end like this Devlin family
No,
ended.
absolutely
not.
Let's hope not, because this was really, really good. You're right. It did feel supernatural.
Yeah.
In its kind of flavor, but it helped to sort of pull this new band, shall I say, together in the form of Crystal and the two boys as well.
Yeah.
But shall we get into it, Derek?
Yeah.
What are some of the episode details for The Case of the Devlin House?
Well, episode 3 was written by Kirsty Lowry and Ian Weinrich. Kirsty was a staff writer on the show 12 Monkeys
nice.
Before getting the role here, so that's pretty cool. Interestingly, Ian Weinrich used to be a writer on Honest Trailers, writing, I think, about 40 or 50 of the Honest Trailers, which is quite interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah,
what a pathway.
Absolutely. So working on finding all the holes in movies and TV shows, and then writing movies and TV shows himself. It's quite cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I like it. And I really like this director. Cheryl Dunya directed this episode. She directed episodes of Why the Last Man, Lovecraft Country, and 2 episodes of season 3 of Umbrella Academy, all of which we've covered right here on TV Podcast Industries. Some great shows there.
Absolutely. Cheryl is a TV podcast director alumni in that sense.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we should get her some kind of golden plaque for directing that many shows over that many different genres as well.
Yeah, being involved in loads of good shows that we've covered.
Absolutely. And this, as I say, this episode feels dark and scary and creepy, and but there's also the light elements of it as well. So it needed a different touch to the first 2 episodes, I think, and pulled off really, really well.
Yeah, for sure.
But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for episode 3, The Case of the Devlin House?
Sure. Still stuck in Port Townsend, the Dead Boy Detectives and their new medium have loads of new clients. They choose a case that most fits their needs and investigate the 30-year-old murder of the Devlin family. When they investigate the haunted family home, they learn that the nightmarish murder has been repeating over and over again. When Charles tries to intervene and gets caught in the loop, Edwin realizes it was caused by the invasive security camera used by Mr. Devlin to spy on his children. He and Crystal wipe the security camera, freeing the family from the eternal nightmare. In the afterlife, the young Devlin daughters delightedly share the story of the ghosts that saved them with the night nurse, who desperately needs details to locate them.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, as I say, this is I like the scarier aspect of this, and they definitely don't shy away when we get into the murders for the episode, do they?
Well, not at all. I mean, even like just the reaction of Charles, Edwin, and Crystal to repeatedly seeing the father taking his axe and striking it at killing his wife and 2 daughters.
Exactly.
Like it's really good, and certainly I think for Charles, because this is where, you know, that suggestion of his own childhood, the few little snippets that we've heard so far, you know, it starts to take root as to how and what that might be in respect to sort of a similar relationship Charles had to his father as the Devlin girls had to Mr. Devlin.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you wonder whether that's what happened to Charles. We mentioned earlier on when we were talking about episode 2 that we don't know much about Charles's history. We know he died of pneumonia and died alone and didn't end off in the afterlife. But that's kind of it for the moment. So did his father kill him? Would be the question that I'd have in here after this episode,
absolutely.
definitely. But we started off last episode doing case notes from the titles coming up on the screen. These were coming thick and fast here, so I think we have 7 case notes, but some very short.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. But let's start with our first case note, John.
Yes, case note number 1. These ghosts have a lot of issues.
Yes. This is the queue that formed outside the door at the end of episode 2 is basically a bunch of ghosts that have realized the Dead Boy detectives are in town and want to give them all of their problems that are causing them to be stuck in Port Townsend, right?
Yeah, there's a whole whiteboard of different cases that they could possibly take. Sort of an evil seagull is one of them.
That keeps bringing feet of swimmers or feet of people to the beach.
Absolutely. There's the guy whose head explodes and then he's like, "Oh, I'm fine now."
Yeah.
Almost like a ghostly headache.
That was that was a great punchline to that as the boys get absolutely covered in gunk when his head explodes. But I really like this stuff that they do in some shows or in some movies where they give this look into what the writer's room must look like, where they come up with ideas and what they're actually going to focus on for the investigation. So the writers write down loads of ideas that could possibly be the investigation, and you have a big joke around them, you know.
Exactly.
The woman that just can't stop crying, and then she just screams and shrieks like a monster, you know.
And also one of the cases, which is a cursed painting, which provides a solution for dealing with this sort of loop of the Devlin murder and Charles being caught in it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this ghost seems to have the worst version of Dorian Gray. Dorian Gray in reverse. The painting gets younger as he gets older and more gruesome.
Oh, that's so good.
But very funny.
That would be my look.
Exactly.
I would just wither on the bone whilst I had this painting just getting
more
ever
beautiful
more pretty.
But I do like that the solution for that is just pour some turpentine on it and wipe off the painting. You'll be grand.
Get rid of the curse, exactly.
Take 2 paracetamol and call me in the morning, basically.
But ultimately, the case that they pick, and I almost felt there was a bit of Shaun of the Dead moment here, where it's like, you know, well, we get paid, clean up the town, so it'll be done by, you know, ready for a pint in the Winchester. But they pick Susan Kessler, and she is the sister-in-law to the father that killed all the family. And she has recently died and went back one last time to the Devlin house, but there was something unnerving about it and screams, and so that's why she's coming to report this to the Dead Boy detectives.
Absolutely. And again, I do like this idea that they're using here. She died a week ago, so now she's coming to report it to the Dead Boy detectives before she moves on. I like that little touch. It feels like Beetlejuice had something like this. The cases after characters had died. So I think that's a bit of a fun little idea there, that she's coming into this room here a week after she's died. She sat on this for 30 years. But really, after she's died, she hears the screams of what's happening inside because it's a ghostly, supernatural happening that's in there. Yeah.
And so immediately, Charles and Crystal check in with Jenny downstairs at the butcher's to find out a little bit more, some of the rumor, some of the information around the Devlin murders in the town of Port Townsend, because it was a big, big thing. I really like Jenny, you know. I mean, she says he went all psycho, used an axe. It was the father, but the rumors were that his wife had been having an affair, that the new Radio Shack in town was taking a business away from his own little shop. And interestingly, though, she does say that the house is going to be torn down, which adds impetus for Charles and Crystal and Edwin, because then the souls of these ghosts trapped within the Devlin house will effectively just be in nothing forever.
Yeah, they can't go on to the afterlife. They can't move on anywhere else. They're just stuck in the unknown forever, effectively.
But it's not even limbo. It's just blackness.
Exactly. Also in the conversation with Jenny, she's given me a new quote that I think we might be using quite often, John, when people ask us about what we're doing at the weekend or what we're talking about or anything like that. Jenny says to the two of them when they're trying to investigate the Devlin House murders, she says, you're not doing a stupid podcast about it, are you? So you're not doing a stupid podcast about it. Might go on the soundboard in the future.
It might do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I like this a lot. I like the setup. And I think it moves us on to case note number 2, which is Nico's Aunt Cindy, because whilst Charles and Crystal are checking in with Jenny, we have Edwin going disguised to the library with Nico, but disguised as her Aunt Cindy.
Absolutely.
Which I loved this.
Yeah, we've seen the disguises a bit as the episodes have gone on, but I love the conversation between Nico and Edwin as they get there, where Nico's looking at him going, are you always a woman? Is Charles always a woman? What's the choice? Why did you decide to do this today and not every other day? And he's kind of going, yeah, but I just don't want to make you look crazy talking to me, which will look like you're talking to nobody while you're in the library, because everybody will be looking at you thinking that you're weird because you're just talking out loud. But I also like the break of the two of them. I like the idea that Edwin's gone off here with Nico and Charles has gone off with Crystal. You know, it separates the main characters and allows them to have a little bit of a different adventure. And again, the reasoning behind it is Charles and Crystal are going to go and get the hearsay, as Edwin calls it, but he's going to go and get the real facts from the library. And they do intercut the two of them. They have Jenny telling the story from the perspective of the hearsay in the town, but then you see the actual newspaper clips of what was happening at the time and what
really
actually happened. I thought it works really well.
It's really good, and it's also that, you know, as they're leaving the library with this new information, we get Monty bumping into Edwin, but equally back at the butcher's shop, Esther comes in for her order of meat, and effectively, you know, like you say, just kind of toys with Crystal and Charles in the butcher shop. It's not like she's suddenly going to start, you know, she whacks him almost playfully with the iron walking stick that she has, but of course it is painful for Charles, but she's kind of like
ghost skin.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like how this intercut for sure. And equally here we get to see Edwin bumping into Monty, who shows, you know, he does show an interest here immediately in Edwin. I mean, even combating his skepticism over astrology. And he goes, well, of course you would say that. When's your birthday? Yes, you're a Capricorn or whatever it was, or Sagittarius. I like how you see Monty inserting himself this way into Edwin's life. I like that Nico also picks up on it.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely.
Being the more sort of emotionally accessible compared to Edwin.
I think Edwin would probably have been really dismissive if Monty had come directly up to him. He probably would have just dismissed her out of hand, but Nico kind of helps it along because she's so excited about someone that can guess what her star sign is. Just from a few key clues. So Monty's probably quite lucky that he came along while Nico was there. because he may not have been able to accomplish whatever plan it is that Esther has, because Edmund could have just pushed him away. But there's definitely interest.
Yeah, and he does, he says, I can see you because I was in a coma.
Yes, after a terrible, terrible car accident. Yeah. Yes, says Nico, just like me, apart from the terrible, terrible car accident.
Exactly. So, yeah, I loved how this just sort of, the initial investigation kicked off here in this episode. But I think going on to our case note number 3, we're immediately sort of pulled down into the afterlife, and it is don't mess with the notary.
Yeah, I know it's a short scene, but I thought it was a lot of fun to see this notary who has as much power in hell. It feels like something out of Good Omens, doesn't it?
It does. It also feels like where I work, which is a government bureaucracy, where, and it's very specific. Like,
specificity is key, John.
I do understand, the infuriation actually that the night nurse had around this kind of just conversation. You mean I can't do this because of that and because of this? As I say, I've quoted a lot, Futurama's The Great Bureaucracy, where there's a form for everything. Okay, it's not like that where I work, but it is equally, there is just sort of this, the rigidity of rules sometimes, which are, of course, are there for a reason.
Absolutely.
Right? But it's when they're not reasonable.
Yeah. And in fairness, I was listening to the words that the notary was saying, and I was going, you know what? That's actually not too bad. It's as long as they can find within 2 kilometers radius, as long as they have the area roughly, rather than having these people from the afterlife wandering all over Earth trying to find them. You get your travel granted. You get your expenses paid as long as you tell us what hotel you're staying in, basically.
Yeah, I love the night nurse's reaction here. They were just like, I've hit up upon bureaucracy.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people can understand that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, though, as well, it plays into what we heard a bit earlier as well, because the notary does say, have you seen how many cases that I've got? There is this aspect that there are too many cases of missing people that is preventing the afterlife management effectively from dealing with all these caseloads following death.
Yes.
And so they're all kind of fairly strung out, maybe because the procedures are all far too intricate, but nonetheless.
Yeah. They may not have been made to deal with a situation where the afterlife's having trouble keeping track of the dead.
Exactly.
And they have to do hundreds and hundreds of cases where they may only have had 2 or 3 in the past.
Because I like the way the notary just says, because I've got all this to do.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to get a meeting with your boss or with my boss because of how busy we are. So exactly. I liked just how that played together with this little point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to our next case note, which is the house on Hayward Drive, is what appears on the screen. This is only a short one at the beginning of the investigation as they go to Hayward Drive, where the Devlin family lived. And what they see when they go into the house, it's ready to be knocked down. As you mentioned, John, it's going to be knocked down the next day. And they hear this music kicking in. The owner of A Lonely Heart kicks in.
Yeah.
And as it kicks in, this scene plays out in front of them, which is, I think, massively brutal. I mentioned, again, when we were talking earlier on, it doesn't pull any punches. You see the axe swing and you see the mom getting killed and then the 2 daughters getting killed as they're all supposed to be sitting down to watch TV. And then we have to kind of try and rewind through it as with the detectives here as they work out what happened in the house. The only other touch that's added in here is the 2 cats that are sitting outside the window going, this house is messed up. I'm so glad I can sit out here and watch it rather than going in. And of course, they also kind of go, do you think the dark-haired one and the girl are going to get it on at some point? Oh yeah, they're definitely going to get it on.
Absolutely.
So, foul-mouthed kitties again.
Absolutely. But I mean, it is visceral. Like the cats say, it's a messed up house.
Yeah.
There's high emotions here that are resonating, or is a resonance of the event that took place. Like the cats really reinforce that this is a messed up house.
Yeah.
The death is visceral. It's highly charged emotionally. And Charles seems particularly affected by this.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that they note immediately is that they're ghosts, but they use the doors.
Exactly. And they can't see any of them in the house. And then when the gunshot goes off from upstairs, everything stops completely. And then it starts up again. So
with the flickering of the light bulbs and the music of Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the way with the murder as well, certain scenes were framed in the camera which reflected the newspaper cuttings as well. So like when the axe goes to the floor, it's kind of in the same position and angle as what we saw in the library from the newspaper cutting.
Very good. So they used the on-set continuity person's photos for the newspapers, I guess.
Yeah.
Very good. Very smart. Very smart. I like it. Move on to our next case note. As I said, there's about 7 in here. So our next case note is the stone tape theory. So this is the theory as to what's happening here that comes from Edwin. That because of this massive traumatic event, it's imprinted on the house itself. It's imprinted the entire actions of this father of the Mr. Devlin as he kills his family. Yeah. And this is repeating over and over again, this stone tape idea that there's a trigger there that is forcing this whole situation to just go on repeat over and over again.
Looping round. There's that jump. So there's that moment that kicks it off. And that's what they begin to investigate to see what is the trigger that keeps this loop of death, having the family trapped here in this particular situation where they're being repeatedly murdered over and over again with this massive traumatic event. We hear Edwin, Crystal, saying, I don't think I can watch this again. They go into another room to discuss this. So, I really like that. I mean, they do think that it's the music to begin with. And then piece by piece they start going, it's this letter.
Yes.
That we have the father come down saying that, you're not going to leave me for Hudson. And it links back to Jenny's, hearsay that his wife had an affair because he's saying it seemingly to his wife.
Yeah.
As she gets up and he's got the axe in his hand ready to strike her. But they rip up the letter, but it reforms again and it starts over on the new loop. But we do find that the letter is not about an affair. It was that one of his daughters had got an offer for university.
Yeah. It's even crazier than his wife's cheating on him. It's that his daughter's actually getting away from the house and going to be able to go to college, or to university. And he doesn't want to let her out of his sight, because as we find out later, he's got the whole house wired up. That little touch. And again, it was just in one of the lines that Jenny said that he owned his own electrical store. So because of that, here he is, he's wired up his whole house and set cameras everywhere in the house to watch and monitor everything that his family did. And his daughter had mentioned that she was scared of him because, in her diary, that she was scared of him because he seemed to know everything that was happening. And that's how he found the letter. He found it locked in her drawer and hidden in her drawer because he'd been watching this on the cameras that are hidden within his house. Truly terrifying idea that you'd have cameras all over the inside of your home, and your parents would be monitoring what you're doing all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really terrifying idea.
But those few stumbles where, destroying the letter doesn't seem to stop the looping. Charles intervenes. He says, we've tried it your way.
Yes.
Let's now try it my way, as he looks to hit the cricket bat over the back of the head of the dad. But he gets stopped and ultimately then gets caught as part of the loop because of, effectively he's kind of pulled into the looping.
Particularly because he's so emotionally connected to it. Just like the theory of the stone tape leaving its scar on the building, he's been pulled into it because he's emotionally connected to the situation.
The trauma of his relationship with his dad.
Exactly. And again, this is, it's all reinforcing for me. Is his father responsible for Charles's death in some way? We did see that earlier on in the season. We saw him watching onto his father. We've heard him say his father wasn't a nice person. And here he is, so emotionally connected to this idea of this brutalizing father and the guy who monitors his kids and tell them everything that they're doing is wrong. Here's Charles trying to get involved and get stuck.
And I think the good thing, the impetus to get this sort of worked out and resolved is notched up again with Charles getting caught in the loop, because he will also experience just black for the rest of his life if they don't solve this mystery as to how it's being caught in the loop. So I really like that, because it really sort of cranks up the tension between Crystal and Edwin, who do have a few arguments here. So they think that it's something to do with the music, but they haven't seen any tape deck or anything. And ultimately, like you say, it comes back to bits that they've picked up on from, I think it's Hope's diary, one of the daughters, complaining that her dad had crazy rules. They're getting stricter and stricter. It's the reason why she wants to leave for university. Yeah. And all these things are resonate with Charles as well.
Exactly.
And his story that, he would check in on his parents to make sure that his dad doesn't hurt his mom. He could never please his dad, just like the Devlin daughters as well.
Yeah.
Never able. So this all sort of connects into why Charles has been trapped in this loop. But in the end, they realize that the music's coming from the walls, and behind there we have this creepy sort of little space where their father has got monitors and is effectively recording and watching everything that they do on closed circuit TV.
Exactly. Very creepy. And we able to leave that for a second, with our next case note, because the next one that pops up is Nico and the bell jar, to go back to Nico, because she didn't go with the team, to the house. She stayed at home because obviously, having almost died the previous day, she didn't want to go and watch a murder happening. But the little sprites in the bell jar are getting at Nico, telling her she's a coward, telling her she's useless. No wonder she has no friends at all.
Well, I'm so glad. I'm so glad they brought the two sprites back. I mean, I love that they're just so rude. Like, did being a coward come naturally? Just the insults are flying towards Nico. As
you suck. All your friends are going to die.
Yeah. And because, she is alone whilst the others are out working the case, potentially in trouble. And it does persuade Nico to get herself together to go and help, and go to the Devlin house to help.
I like it because they're basically trying to criticize her, trying to get her to pay them some attention, and get fed, basically. And here she is just going, oh, they must be telling me to go and save my friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get my stuff together, off I go.
Well, the other thing for the sprites is, given that they crave adoration, they generally have got a jumper over the jar. So no one can see them.
Exactly.
So I wonder if they get weaker over time from that.
Maybe.
So one day, Nico might open that jar and it's just two mini skeletons.
Oh dear. I hope not. Hope they get out of this. They are hilarious to listen to anyway, so I hope we don't end off with two little skeletons.
Yeah, I hope they survive as well. But I was just thinking, maybe they might just get sort of starved of the attention that they need.
And maybe they just turn back into dandelions, John, maybe.
Yeah, but meanwhile, as Nico is preparing herself to sort of head on over to the Devlin house, I think we go on to our case note number 7, which is Think Happy Thoughts.
This is more case notes than we've ever had in any of our podcasts.
Absolutely.
Maybe they won't do this for the other episodes. There's quite a lot on here, but yes, Think Happy Thoughts. This is because Edwin and Crystal, who are searching around the house, find that there is also a misery wraith in the house, and they need to think happy thoughts to free themselves, right, from the possible
effectively being captured and dragged by the wraith into the afterlife.
Yeah, I don't think Edwin has to worry about it. It's just Crystal, because she's still alive and still human. But while she's trying to focus on those happy thoughts, Demon Dave makes another appearance here, dragging Crystal over to his place, effectively. And once again, he's offering to give her back her memories if she takes him back inside. So yeah, pretty scary moment here. for her, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this misery wraith, I mean, earlier she hears something in the ventilation system, wondering what that scraping was. And it is this misery wraith. At the same time, they're also trying to, figure out, what they need to do to actually release the Devlins and Charles from this loop.
Exactly.
And so they realize, such as with the painting that was getting younger and younger, that what they need to do is to wipe the curse from the video. So it's this, the persistence, the reason for this loop, is because it was being recorded and all the emotion was coming through the recordings that actually showed the murder of this family, and then the father taking his own life with the gun. So they do exactly the same thing as the painting, but just with a VHS tape by recording over it.
Yeah, and there's little touches here with Edwin, who doesn't really understand what's going on at
exactly.
all. He doesn't understand this idea of video at all. Doesn't understand this idea of a videotape that could be holding it. And it's an interesting one. I wonder if, when they're sitting in the writer's room, when they're coming up with these concepts and ideas, I wonder if they're kind of thinking of The Ring, when they're thinking of this concept, the videotape that is cursed. How would you fix that if there was a way about fixing it? Maybe it is to delete the tape effectively, There's a nice little touch when they're, kind of going back and forth between Crystal and Edwin here, where Edwin's kind of going, well, we'll just destroy the tape. And then they realize, well, if they destroy the tape, it would be the same thing as destroying the house. Everybody that's trapped in the loop would die or would no longer be able to go on to the afterlife. So I like that little touch there. So they wipe the tape.
But that's it. I mean, there's a lot going on here in these final moments where they do actually wipe the tape. You've got the misery wraith, you've got Demon Dave affecting Crystal, and you've got the ticking clock of trying to save them before the house is torn down.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a lot going on, but they do wipe the tape, and Death comes to take and free the Devlins.
Yes.
But not all as such in the same way, because Death also comes for Daddy Devlin. Brandon is his name, I think.
Yes,
if I remember rightly.
It is.
And rather than kind of a warm yellowy light, you just get a very red light. He's going straight to hell.
Yes, he is exactly where he belongs.
Yeah.
And luckily, Edwin and Charles get away from Death again. She doesn't see them, or doesn't focus on them, because she's there to collect the Devlin family after 30 years. So she doesn't see them. We don't actually see Death in this episode, but they escape again with their afterlives.
Absolutely. And Nico arrives just not in the nick of time. She's late turning up, but still wants to help.
Exactly. I do like that moment as she runs across to scare away the evil things, carrying all of the stuff to just shout and scream. And she is late. But that's in case closed this time, in the final, second final case note, because there's loads of them. The final case note, though, is a handsome crow and a sitting duck. The final case note is about Monty, because he's sitting outside the butcher shop waiting for Edwin to return. He definitely sees Edwin. I know he can see all the ghosts, but his focus is entirely on Edwin. He doesn't really care about Charles or anybody else in the group.
Yeah,
he is focused right on Edwin there.
And it gets everyone else is getting very awkward with the frisson between the two, especially from Monty to Edwin. I think Edwin doesn't really sort of as such connect into that in the same way. He's all fairly businesslike, really still. But yeah, he's effectively hitting on Edwin
Absolutely.
in the shop. And again, the cats are watching, keeping tabbies on on what's going on with the Dead Boy detectives. And I like we do have Esther intervening here as well, stopping the cats from watching, effectively shooing them away.
Exactly. I also like that Nico has to be shooed away from the two boys as well, because she's really excited about this. She reads about this loads in manga, some of it quite explicit, as she's dragged away by Crystal.
So
really good. And then just the last touch of the episode, we go back to the afterlife. And again, it's something that I really like in the wrap up here. We see the Devlin girls really happy now that they've been freed from this nightmare that's been going on. So you hear that for 30 years they were experiencing this the whole time. They knew what was going on, even though they were killed in that moment. They've been experiencing that almost like its own hell. And here they are really happy about the fact that they were freed by the 2 dead boys and their living friends.
They're heroes, effectively.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the night nurse that's interviewing them as they pass on to their afterlife.
Yes.
Yeah.
She has got her specificity. She's got her 2-kilometer radius.
She does, yes. She knows they're in Port Townsend now, so I guess we're going to see her in Port Townsend in the next episode.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, it was such a good ending. I think the endings have been really good to this show, at least for these first 3 episodes. Just real kind of lick of the chops, ready for the next one. Really wants you to move on, which, possibly helps when it's been dropped all at once.
Yes, that is the Netflix way, huh?
Yeah.
So overall, John, what did you think of the 3rd episode of The Dead Boy Detectives?
Again, this was really in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I'd give this 4.5 loop the loops out of 5.
Very good.
I just was really, it strayed more into the darkness here. I know that sounds strange for a show that's dealing with the afterlife and everything. In a sense, a lot of it's there, but there is a lightness to it, which is also, I think is needed. It helps, and it's that balance. And I think this show has that balance between the dark and the lightness here, even though I think they delve more into, I guess, horror elements.
Yeah.
I think with the Devlin murders, but, loads of intrigue here. I think the relationships between all the characters are just so good, whether it's the friendships, whether it's being the protagonists or the antagonists. They're just really, really good. And it's peppered with some great cameos from Esther. Great to see the Dandelion sprites back as well as the cats. It's something that you don't necessarily need to include, but actually it just helps link these episodes together, even though they are that really good balance of being episodic and linking together. And I think the endings have really sort of given that intrigue a good old hoof in order to get you to the next episode. So I really enjoyed this episode.
That is a good point. I do wonder when the notification came down, effectively, when they were making this for Warner Brothers, that it was no longer going to be a HBO show. It was going to be on Netflix, and it wasn't going to be weekly anymore. Like Doom Patrol is a weekly show, so I presume this was going to be a weekly show. But when did that edict come down? Because there's moments in the episodes, and they're fine. You can drop into any episode. You can watch it on Netflix whatever way you want to. You can watch it weekly like we are. But I noticed a lot in the opening of the episodes. You hear them recapping stuff that happened in the episode you've just seen if you're binging it. But also at the end of the episodes, they have these big cliffhangers that make you want to just wait those 4 seconds for it to go on to the next episode. So that's a Netflix structure, that bit at the end and the bit at the beginning where they recap everything that happened in the last episode, or the big beats that happened in the last episode. That's much more weekly television does that. Usually Netflix doesn't waste time in their 40-minute episodes, you know what I mean? So I wonder when they decided to make that change,
Well, yeah, and I mean, as always, I've said this a few times now about the Netflix model, but I think, having it weekly, or maybe, 2 for the first release and then going weekly, I actually just think it's also really important for this great cast of characters to have that time, other than ultimately possibly around a week and a half, in the limelight, that it just extends it over, maybe 4 weeks or 5 weeks by rearranging when the episodes come out, and not just the cast, but the showrunner and the crew and the people involved in it, because I do feel that in a sense it might just get lost. I think it's great that it's got the Sandman connection now, because there is something else there, but I just think give them their due, their moment in the sun, because if it's good, people will come week after week. Exactly. And I think this is a good show.
Yeah, me too. I always say that I much prefer watching shows like this week to week, and I feel the structure of the show is probably week to week. The fact that it's only 8 episodes and people probably binged it in the first weekend, I am worried that it'll just disappear into the back catalogue on Netflix. But thankfully, they did put it in as part. Not only is it connected to the Sandman because there's some connections to the episodes. If you go into the Sandman, it's on the same page saying it's part of the universe. So it will constantly remind you to look at this if you like the Sandman kind of thing. So
stuff.
that's a good thing anyway.
Yeah.
But John, we have some feedback from our wonderful fellow dreamers because we missed out on it last week because we recorded it before the episodes came out.
Our dead postman has given us all the mail.
Yes, he has. Do you want to kick us off with our first piece of feedback on Dead Boy Detectives episode 1?
Yes, we got an email through from Coffee and Vodka. It says, greeting fellow detecting defenders. When a Sandman and a Doom Patrol love each other very much, they wrestle for a bit and have a baby that's very much Umbrella Academy in tone.
Nice.
I like it. It's the villains that make or break a story. So far, David's a great possible season-long foil, and you've got to love Jen Lyon's witchy performance. That they were able to bring Kirby back for a brief appearance made a good story even better. As for our heroes, it's going to take another episode or two for them to grow on me, but all in all, a really good start. 4 Cats on a Wire, preponderantly possessed psycho-psychics, and smoking witches out of 5. Peace and take care. Coffee and Vodka.
Excellent Coffee and Vodka. As a resident Doom Patrol fan, I'm glad you enjoyed the first episode of the show. I know we have some feedback on the other episodes as well from you as we go through our feedback section here. But you're totally right. There's some really interesting possibilities in that first episode. Lots going on there. And yeah, some great performances that just stand out in that first time. And of course, having Kirby back as Death in that first episode was fantastic to really tie it in and cement it. You know, this episode, as you saw, even though Death does come to claim them, we don't get an appearance by Death in the episode. So you would have expected that that's probably how episode 1 would have been handled. It just would have been off screen. They run away. They're always running away from Death, and you never see the actress back. So I'm glad they chose to at least show her in the first episode.
It would have been nice to have seen Death back again.
It would.
And in particular for the father, because from a colour palette perspective from outside the house, it's a blood red.
I understand, and I think this is slightly in the Sandman mythology, though, where Death isn't necessarily a personification at the death of every single person. She is there to usher everybody on. She is there for bad and good people. It's just a difficult thing to get across if you're only having her as a cameo appearance in an episode.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you'd have to, she tends to have this beautiful presence on screen, as we said, that she's ushering people on to the next journey, I guess. Whereas if she was doing that with the father, you'd have to explain why she was getting angry at him, or it would be a different character.
Not angry as such, but you know, even if it's just the kind of more softly threatening tone, you know, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think it's something that hopefully we'll see Death usher on bad people in the future in Sandman, but I think it's good to keep that for Sandman. Okay, that's my feeling, but I understand.
And you're probably right there, absolutely.
Yeah. But of course, as I said before, I wanted a whole Death miniseries to come out as a spin-off because it's just a fabulous character.
Yeah.
So, great
Excellent stuff. And totally with you, Coffee and Vodka, on Jen Lyon's witch. She's great.
Old Esther. Really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very young Esther. Sorry. Very young Esther. Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
Thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
We got a message in from Patrick Lemke who says, the mention of iron having the ability to burn ghosts, I can't seem to find where that comes from, but I know in DC lore, the nth metal can harm ghosts. Learned that from Batman, the Brave and the Bold, when Batman fought Gentleman Ghost. The cats being able to see ghosts called back to Keanu Reeves' Constantine film. In some ways too, in that John said felines are already half in, half out of the afterlife. So by that logic, they can see ghosts and I guess speak to them. Wonderful show so far. Loving the characters. The visuals are nice. Hopefully it's one of those shows that has closure for the arcs, but leaves the journey open-ended in case they get renewed or not.
Good stuff. Thanks, Patrick. I think there's a lot of tie-ins here. Really like the half in, half out, as you sort of, correctly sort of pull from the movie Constantine.
Yes, John Constantine, a very regular visitor to the Sandman universe, and the character created by Alan Moore, who was a very good friend of Neil Gaiman's. So Interesting. Yeah, I guess, one of the things that we always say, it's kind of a lot of things are pulled from lore when they're brought into Sandman. So, a lot of things will have an origin in mythology. I know, definitely when I looked that up, the iron having the ability to burn ghosts, there is something about iron having abilities against ghosts, chaining down the ghosts. I'm sure, might
be supernatural.
Might have been something in the TV show Supernatural, but definitely it is something in mythology as well. So, it's really interesting. But glad you're enjoying it though, Patrick, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's hope they get renewed, I think.
Absolutely.
At least judging by the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick. Lara Willie Swink says, smashing first episode, Dead Boys, pipe smoking witches, demon exes, pet crows, I want one, and do you think Monty knows Matthew?
Yeah, maybe.
Travel by mirror and swearing cats. I knew those little fluff nuggets were foul-mouthed beasties. Everything that's in my dark and cozy comfort zone. It was lovely to see Kirby Howard Baptiste back as the ever-gentle and kind-hearted Reaper, though she makes me want to cry every time I see her. Mm-hmm. And as the Dead Boys were extracting the demon David from Crystal, I thought, gee, it would be very helpful to have a powerful and skilled exorcist right now. Might we get an appearance from Joanna Constantine herself? Keeping my fingers crossed both for Joanna and to ward off the demon hordes. Excellent stuff, Lara. I'm so glad you're enjoying this. And yeah, I think that would be lovely for Monty to know Matthew, and I think
Matthew is Sandman's Raven, as Morpheus is Raven, just in case our listeners don't remember it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want a crow as well to go with my little fluff nugget, Cat King, our podcast, Charlie.
Little Charlie. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great stuff. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Lara. We also got a message in from Dr. Bob Phillips, who says, watching this with zero foreknowledge and entranced by episode 1, full of camp confidence, joy, and a cracking sense of humour, along with 3 characters I desperately want to have happy endings. And I love the Heartstopper anime girl vibe along with goth butcher queen.
Ah, yes. The goth butcher queen, Jenny. Yep. All hail Jenny.
Absolutely.
So good. And Jenny and Esther, fantastic.
Yeah, and the Heartstopper anime girl, which is Nico now, as we know, as the episode's been going on. Great stuff, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bob.
On to episode 2, John.
Yeah, Paul Tianchi Lee says, I vaguely remember Edwin and Charles from Season of Mists, but they were younger, like 12-ish, right? I think I read the Game and Stories in the Vertigo annuals, but I never knew about them getting their own book, side-eyeing my comic shop from 20 plus years ago for not adding them to my pull list. Enjoying the show, but I'm happy to not worry so much about the Sandman of it all for reasons below. A quick check in the Wikipedia entry tells me that I'm not going to easily catch up on their comic stories without a subscription to something like Universe Infinite. But based on the summaries, the later writers seem to have aged them up a bit, as is clearly the case in the show. This makes sense from a TV point of view, given the ability to make the show more mature, but it complicates the storytelling for characters who ought not to change for lore reasons. I haven't watched past episode 2, so don't know if we get the backstory of how Edwin avoided death after dying, but it seems like 1989 is a significant year, which ties back to their comics origins. However, given Sandman Season 1 is in the present, and we won't get the adaptation of Season of Mists until Season 2, that means there hasn't... So our dead detectives, specifically Edwin, must have gotten out of hell in a different manner. Constantine? I further suppose that Edwin had been out and about for some time before coming across a dying Charles, letting him be Charles's guide to staying alongside the living and avoiding death. Interesting synchrony for my YouTube subscription. I follow the Englishman Leo Sampson Goulden, who is restoring an English wooden racing yacht in Port Townsend.
Wow.
I like having Crystal as another character with different occult abilities, being a young woman and a person of colour. Not sure if Charles has also changed to be a person of colour. The actors portraying his parents could be from the subcontinent, and I think his mother might be wearing a sari. Mirror time is hard. It modernizes the characters and possible stories and gives another dynamic to our leads, especially given what we find out about Edwin in episode 3. Jenny, the butcher, running essentially a boarding house definitely gives me Dollhouse vibes. Given the truncated nature of that adaptation in Sandman Season 1, this might be something for Sandman fans to hook onto. Totally agree with you there, Paul. I think it really is something that you can hook onto if you're a Sandman fan.
Yeah, I can see it totally. Like she's taking in the waifs and strays across Port Townsend. So I kind of like that as the analogy of the Dollhouse in season 1. We only got 3 episodes to tell the Dollhouse tale in season 1. So it does feel like that where we have all of these people living under one roof.
And I think your mirror time is probably correct. Certainly the actor who plays Charles, Jaden Reverie, is British Indian, or it comes from an Indian family.
I think so. Yeah. But it does allow you to do a lot with it. You know, I must say the actual story that's in Season of Mists of Edwin and Charles, but the characters aren't totally defined where you would have to cast somebody that looks exactly like the two of them. The actual stories of the Dead Boy Detectives, they're not actually a huge amount of them. They have, you know, they had appearances over the years, and they had a 12-issue comic book series and another one, a bit later on, but I think it was only about 6 issues though. So they haven't had a huge amount of stories across the DC universe, mostly because they sat inside the Sandman universe for that one story in Season of Mist, which is 1 issue long and is pretty scary and pretty terrifying. As for how it's going to connect to Sandman Season 2, I have bleeped out, as you may have noticed, what John called out from what happens in the Sandman Book 2, just in case people don't know it. I don't want to spoil what is coming in Season 2, but I believe that bit is still coming for you, Paul. I believe that is coming in Season 2. And there is probably a way that you could tie this story of Edwin and Charles into what happens in the Sandman comic book. But I think to tell the story in this season, we may not see the full origin story of the two characters. We'll just have to wait and see as we get into the episodes a bit deeper.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think it's still possible. You know, we do have Edwin and Charles here around their same timelines as in the comic books. But just to point out, Paul is absolutely right that the two characters are around 12 years old in the comic book.
Okay. Yeah.
Which there's a little nod to that in the costume for Edwin. I don't know whether you've noticed this. He's supposed to be wearing a 12-year-old school uniform, which would be kind of knee-length shorts and long socks. And if you see the costume that Edwin's wearing, it looks very similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with Charles, he's got very short pants.
He does.
You know?
He does.
But yeah, thanks, Paul. And I'm glad that you're enjoying the show so far.
Definitely, yep. Thanks so much, Paul. Dr. Bob Phillips has his thoughts on episode 2. He says this show definitely delivers. Kinky Cat Kings and sweary middle-aged daffodil sprites were not on the list of things I needed to see, but now I'm glad I have. Will Edwin crumble to be decuffed and leave America? Will the Dead Boys and Medium be joined by the cartoon-loving lady? Can one small town really eat that much meat? Dr. Bob Phillips.
It's the way Jenny cuts it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Just the way Jenny cuts it.
You know, we've lost a lot of good butchers. A good butcher is one of the best things to have in a local town. Definitely. Yeah. So absolutely. Jenny's obviously great at her job.
She is.
Yeah.
Can handle a cleaver with consummate ease, old Jenny.
Yeah, and not only is she providing meat for everybody, she's also providing a key ingredient in Esther's skincare regime. So,
yeah, a bit of tallow.
Exactly.
Melted down.
Exactly. If you do all that stuff, you're going to stay in business as a butcher.
Yeah, really glad you're enjoying it, Dr. Bob. Thanks so much, as always, for the old feedback.
Absolutely. Kinky Cat Kings and sweary middle-aged daffodil sprites. I love it.
Yes.
Coffee and Vodka shared his thoughts on episode 2 and 3. He says, greetings, fellow catnap defenders. Episode 2, come on, Edwin, live a little. Go count cats as the new long walk off a short pier to me. Though the encounter did set up an emotional subplot, they missed a great cameo opportunity for Bast. If those sprites were any more entertainingly toxic, they'd be in the US Congress. I love a coffee vodka. On to episode 3, he says, a good old-fashioned haunted house tale with a voyeuristic twist, and it looks as if we're to see the night nurse in action very soon. So far, these are quite good despite feeling a compromise on creative direction. 4 manic pixelated dream girls, witch-wrought thirst traps, and Looney Tunes out of 5. Peace and take care, Coffee and Vodka.
Excellent stuff, Coffee and Vodka. totally with you. That good old-fashioned haunted house tale. Really, really good. And yeah, I mean, it seems Night Nurse has got the location, you know?
Yeah.
All sites on the Port of Townsend.
Absolutely. I wonder, will we get a cameo of Bast later on in the season?
I don't know.
I guess the true queen of all cats, I guess, or leader of all cats. So I guess, you know, we're talking about it, and the cat king here is a cat king, because he's the cat king of Port Townsend, not the cat king of the world. So maybe it's just a much smaller group, of course, and maybe we will see his master at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
Maybe that'll be the way to do it. Great stuff. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka.
Thanks, Coffee and Vodka. Robert Williams had some thoughts on episode 2 and 3 as well. Robert says, hey guys, starting to get into the groove of the show. The interesting film style with cutaways and scene jumping, like when Crystal wants to see the book and it just jumps to the audience seeing the book, or just throwing up a title for the next chapter in the episode thing. And they use this style very well. Some shows go a little too far with trying these tricks, but I'm enjoying it here. Second, looking to see if you're experiencing what I have been experiencing with the dynamic between the ghosts Charles and Edwin and Crystal, where the show draws me in, and just when I start to forget that Charles and Edwin are ghosts, they have a scene that reminds me, oh yeah, no one can see them. Such as when Nico asks Crystal if she's insane. Thanks guys again for the time you take to do the show. Robert.
Great stuff. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, that is a great moment with Nico, you know, as Crystal's going, I've got my 2 special friends. They're right here in the room with me. Are you insane? Yeah, it does feel like that. It's hard because Charles and Edwin are able to interact with so much things around them. They're reading books, they're throwing things, they're smashing things off the poles, as we mentioned when Edwin's trying to get rid of the bracelet, he's smashing it off a pole, and everybody can hear the noise but can't see them. So it's hard to remember that they're ghosts all the time when they're able to interact with so much around them. You know, there's no moments where they're just walking through walls unless it's specifically required by the episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I'm kind of really enjoying just the theme with Jenny's interaction of both Crystal and I guess Nico really here. Yeah. Because it just looks as though they are speaking to themselves. Exactly. Or just doing strange things. And she's like, what is going on with you two?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
But great stuff. Thanks, Robert.
Absolutely. Great to hear from you, Robert, and great to hear from everybody for your feedback so far on the Dead Boy Detectives. Keep sending it in. You can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. You can leave your thoughts there on any of the spoiler posts for Dead Boy Detectives.
Yes, and of course, remember to keep subscribed to the show over at tvpodcastindustries.com and any dreamy or nightmarish podcast catcher of your choice. You can also support us through Patreon at patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries or over on Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TVPI. But of course, it's great for you to stay subscribed and to share the podcast with your friends, family, apparitions, ghosts, you name it.
Special friends.
Cat kings, indeed. Because, of course, sharing the podcast is sharing the love. It is sharing the love.
Yes, we'll be back next time with a discussion about the next 2 episodes of Dead Boy Detectives. Episode 4, The Case of the Lighthouse Leapers.
Yes, and episode 5, The Case of the 2 Dead Dragons.
Very good. Speak to you again next time.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow dreamers, for joining us for these 2 episodes of Dead Boy Detectives. Until next time, of course, keep watching, keep listening, and of course, keep dreaming.
Bye.
Just think happy thoughts. Bye.